in the present. So now we can share my screen. And can everyone see that?
Yes, thank you so much. So thanks everyone for joining us for this Utah Artist Fellowship Program. Again, like Tori said, we are recording this, so we'll have this available on our website and we'll make sure it gets sent to you. And so please share this widely with the community so the word about the fellowship gets spread across the state. So next slide, and Nancy.
Okay, so today's agenda, we will be starting with our guidelines. We will give you some information about what to expect when applying and making sure that you meet all the eligibility requirements. We'll also talk about the application review process and do an application walkthrough where we will show you what the application looks like and talk about each of the elements that you'll find that are required. And lastly, we will end with a Q&A where you can bring up your questions or comments.
So I'm going to read through all of this and then I'm going to kind of dig into some of it as we go. So the fellowship, the overview. The fellowships are unrestricted awards of $5,000 that recognize the careers of Utah artists who demonstrate exceptional creativity in their fields. Fellows are selected by nationally renowned arts professionals based on evaluation of work samples from the past 5 years that are submitted with the application. So there's just two things I want to point out here. The word unrestricted award. It really basically means you receive this $5,000 and you can do anything you want with it. We're not going to be making you report on it. You don't have to prove to us after you receive this, if you receive this, what you're going to do. That is what the unrestricted means. If you want to buy a car, if you want to take a trip somewhere to further your artistry, you certainly could do that. The other thing I want to point out is this is funding for individuals. This is an individual artist application. If you are part of a group, and we'll say this again later, you are welcome to use work samples from a group as long as you really point out yourself within this work. So that's just something we want to make sure this is clear. This is an individual's application. The purpose of this, it seeks to support mid-career to established artists reaching pivotal moments in their artistic practice. Applicants are expected to demonstrate why now is the appropriate time in their career for this one-time award. So within that, you're going to be having to demonstrate why this is the right time for you as an artist to receive this. You're going to be needing to show that you are active and engaged in your artistic practice and in the artistic community. So the disciplines. You must be a Utah-based individual artist practicing in the fields of design, music, and or visual arts. That's who's able to apply for the 2023 Utah Artist Fellowship. And that's pretty exciting for us because design is a brand new category within this field. So the award, it's going to be 15 fellows, 5 in each discipline, will each receive a $5,000 award. This fellowship is not an award to support a specific art project, as I mentioned, or recognition of lifetime achievement, or for artists just beginning their artistic careers.
Okay, so eligibility. Every applicant must meet every single eligibility requirement in order to submit an application that can be reviewed by the juror. So we do ask that you carefully read and consider each of these points before submitting an application. Applicants must be 25 years of age or older at the time of the deadline. Design and visual arts applicants must be originators of work submitted. Performing arts applicants may submit their interpretation of others' work. You must be a Utah resident for 2 years prior to the application deadline. Previous fellowship recipients may not apply. This is a one-time award. You must have a U.S. tax ID number, and that can include a social security number, an ITIN number, etc. And this is because the fellowship funds are taxable, so we have to have a way for that tax ID number and that tax form to get to you, and for all of that to be processed by our accounting team. Individuals enrolled in any undergraduate, graduate, or postgraduate degree granting program are not eligible to apply. If you are currently applying for school but are not yet a student, you can still apply. Just make sure that at the time that you submit the application, you are not in school. That's really all that we are asking. But if you are looking forward to an MFA or something similar in the fall, that would be fine as long as you are not a student when you submit that application. And last, the artist teams / groups are not eligible to apply, as Jason mentioned earlier.
So the review process, once you submit, we will be doing a pre-screen as staff. We'll review the applications for completion, eligibility, adherence to the published guidelines. Applicants meeting eligibility requirement but whose applications are found to be incomplete will be contacted by us and given the opportunity to make edits to their application and resubmit. So for example, if a design artist submits their application, but there's only 9 work samples, they forgot to put one in, we will reach out saying, you can fix this, and we'll give them the opportunity to go in and put that next work sample in. A couple things about timing. Please submit your application at least a few weeks before the deadline, at least a week before the deadline. Because the issue is, as we review, and if we run into big problems and we give you the chance to reopen it, we still will not be able to accept late applications. So, and if you're pressing the submit button on the day in which it's due, it's going to be very hard for us to help you if there are problems with your application. So that's the pre-screen. And then after that, and once it goes to the juror, it's completely out of our hands. The juror will receive these, they'll evaluate the work samples, the bio, artist statement, accomplishments, your contributions, and dedication to the field via your artist resume and CV. Please note that your application will be reviewed based on the whole body of your work, with an understanding that the pandemic has affected the production and presentation of new works. So I just want to say once again, once it moves to the juror, we are completely removed from any decision making.
And speaking of jurors, our fellowship jurors change every year. So we bring in brand new people to review all of the applications and make selections, fellow selections. And this year's jurors, we have 3 different jurors. Each of them represent one of the disciplines that we have available through this fellowship. Li Shan Wang, he is our design arts juror for this year and the director of design, content and learning at the American Institute of Graphic Design or Graphic Arts. Also, Netzer is a performing arts juror, and she is assistant professor of composition and musicianship at DePaul University. Leilani Lynch is our visual arts juror, and she is the newly appointed associate curator at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Denver. Something that we like to mention about our jurors is that it can be really helpful to review their work and practice. Having a window into the way that they approach their craft can be really helpful in perhaps thinking of how you're going to craft your application and make it appealing to those jurors.
I want to say one more thing in respect to the jurors. The juror will only be reviewing the applications that are connected to their field. So Osnat, as the performing artist, will only be looking at the music performing arts applications. That was a question that came up earlier today. Okay, next slide. So the timeline, it's open now. The application is open now. It will close March 3rd. We will not accept late applications. We then will review things, send them to the juror, and then artists all artists will be notified of results via email by April 17th. And then in May, we're going to be doing some professional development sessions for everyone who has applied for the fellowship. We're still defining those, but that will be open to everyone regardless of whether you've received the fellowship or not.
And just to give a little bit of background on the workshops, the last few years we have included things like taxes for artists and writing artist statements, things that are really relevant and helpful to your careers and that can potentially also be helpful in crafting your application for next year if you are not one of the selected fellows. Okay, so we are going to do a walkthrough of the application, which you will be able to find in our submittable platform.
Just gotta pull that up real quick. Okay. So we're gonna start on our website page just to show you guys where you can find the full set of guidelines. It would be under the Opportunities tab and the last option. So this is a place where you can find, again, all of the guidelines, and then this Apply Here button that will take you into the form. So we'll go through this one once it opens, and there we go. Okay. Who is talking about this page?
I will. Okay, so the first section here, just a few reminders on, and I think Jason already mentioned, to be mindful of how much time you're giving yourself to fill out the application. There are times when you'll encounter some technical difficulties, and if that happens on that Friday at 11 p.m., it's going to be impossible to get a hold of anyone at Submittable. So we really do want you to keep that in mind. If you have any issues with your Submittable account, the staff, us at Arts and Museums, we do not have access to your individual account, so we won't be able to assist you in that way. So again, just remember that, and there are some contact information that you can use if you encounter any issues. Okay. The first section of the application is very simple, contact information. We have an acknowledgement here where you are simply letting us know that you have read the guidelines, you understand what you are submitting, specifically work samples, that you are providing work samples that were created within the past 5 years. That is very important. And again, just a reminder and acknowledgement there about what you are submitting. We do ask that you select the artistic discipline in which you are applying. You may only select one discipline. You cannot apply for multiple or under multiple disciplines. If you are someone who practices both design and visual arts, you will have to select one of them for your application. And if you don't get selected this year, you always have the opportunity to next year apply under a different discipline, but we do ask that you select one. The next section is your artist bio. And it looks like we have a question. Sorry, Tori, were we holding questions or are we answering as we go?
We can, oh yeah, we were gonna hold them off to the end.
Okay, we're good. And you're welcome to put them in as you think about them. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't missing them.
Yes.
Thank you. So the artist bio, you are asked to submit a bio that's a minimum of 200 words or a maximum of 300. And this is a professional bio, so it should be written in the third person. What this bio does is not only share with the juror a little bit about yourself, just gives an overview of who you are, what your practice entails, and a little bit about your experience. So any significant past or current projects, where you are from, where you live and work. But also if you are a recipient of the fellowship, we will use this artist bio to promote you and your work. And that's why it's important that it's in the third person. Now, your artist statement is the next section. You may submit an artist statement. That's a minimum of 300 words, a maximum of 500. And this statement should be written in the first person because we are asking you to describe your art practice, to tell us about how you approach art making and any overarching concepts behind your work. So it's important that it's written in the first person, and it's giving us an understanding of the type of work that you do, anything that you find relevant to someone understanding and seeing your work for the first time. Okay, and now we have, we ask you to describe why this fellowship award is important to your artistic practice and development. And this is a really good place to really get a little bit personal and talk about why you're applying, what that award and the funding would do for your career. It's really important for both staff, but also the juror, especially the juror, to know what are your future plans for your career, your art practice, and how do you envision this pushing your career forward. And then you will submit an artist CV or resume. We do have a really great link that it's an amazing resource. If you're not familiar with how to create an artist CV or resume, this will walk you through it step by step and give you really great information about the best way to lay out this information on a page. We do ask that your resume or CV is no more than 6 pages, so make sure that you keep that in mind. There is always so much information that I know everyone wants to include, but that is the limit. And then we have the next section will be an optional section, which is your artist website / social media profile. Again, it's optional because we are aware that not everyone has an artist website or a social media profile. And the jury is aware that this is an optional section, so they may or may not review it. And that, again, is up to you if you want to include that information.
I just want to say real quick, the resources that I was mentioning earlier and that Nancy just talked about briefly with the CV and resume, we have some resources on how to best write an artist bio, artist statement, CV, and resume. So those are the links will be included in our follow-up email. And I'll also drop those in the chat once I'm not sharing my screen.
Thanks. Okay. So the next section would be the section where you upload your work samples. Now, as you can see, there's a bit of information here that's really important that you review before uploading any files. It's really important because you will be submitting a very specific number of samples depending on the type of application that you're submitting. For performing arts, you should only include a maximum of 5 work samples. That is the max that performing arts applicants should submit. However, for design and visual arts, they must include 10 work samples. So that is, I think, probably the most important point in this section. But if you are submitting videos, it's important to note that you cannot upload a video file. We are asking for a link to a platform such as YouTube or Vimeo if you are submitting any type of video work. Once you upload those files, we ask that you enter the information that goes to each of those images. So, for example, with work sample 1, you will enter the title, year completed, medium, and dimensions as applicable in that section. If your work sample 1, for example, is a video sample link, that second line is where you would enter that link to YouTube or wherever you have uploaded that video. And then lastly, we ask for an optional description. Many times jurors do want to know a little bit more about that specific work that you're uploading, and it is helpful to provide more context to it. So I always like to suggest that you spend that time writing, 100 words to describe that work and how it relates to your overall art practice.
Nancy,
And-
let me say just one thing about that.
Yes, go ahead.
This is where if you're a performing artist and you're submitting a work sample and there's many people in it, it's in that description right there that you would make it clear for the juror how to identify you. And also, if you have a link to a video, a work sample, and it's quite long, this is also where you would put the timestamp of what the juror should look at in terms of the video, because the videos are really not supposed to be more than 3 minutes each.
A question we had earlier today was if you can upload more images than the required 10, and the answer to that is no. So if you want to include the piece, but you also want the juror to really see a detailed shot, you would have to create a PDF or some sort of file where you can have multiple images in one file, if that makes sense. So try to refrain, I guess, from doing detail shots unless you really want them. Make sure you upload it as one file. And then we did mention that performing arts only has to upload 5. So we have the required asterisks up till 5, but anyone in design or visual arts, please notice that you have to continue on with the 10, even though you will be able to submit your application with just the 5. So just really hammering that one in.
This is where that pre-screen that we were talking about, the review process, this is where the staff, when we get a submission, we'll be looking at how many samples you're submitting and making sure that depending on which discipline you selected, that you are submitting the correct number of work samples. If you did not, that's when our staff would contact you and give you some time to rectify that issue and resubmit. So just remember that if you're a visual artist or you're a design artist, there are 10 work samples that you must submit. And please also make sure that you are looking out for any emails from Submittable. That's where that's a platform where we will contact you if there are any issues with your application.
And again, just here to hammer in the details, but I will help with those edits. And in the past, realistically, I would say give it a 2-day turnaround time to fix the, like, for me to find your application's problem, for me to contact you, for you to make your edit and then submit it before the juror sees it. So again, just try to get everything done. I would say just 4 days before the deadline, just to be safe with that turnaround time for these edits that we would love for you to be able to complete.
And I'll also mention that even those applications that we receive on the deadline, they are still reviewed during that pre-screen, and we will allow you to make edits. But please know that there's a difference between making edits after submitting your application on time and trying to submit an application late. That will not be accepted. So only if you successfully submitted an application before the deadline will you be allowed to make any edits if there's any issues with your application. Okay, so moving on to the last couple of sections of the application, we have a section here where you can tell us where you heard about the fellowship. And that information, that question, and everything else that follows, it's really just for internal review. It helps our staff at the Division of Arts and Museums to know who we are serving, who we are reaching, and that we're a state agency, so that information is very relevant to us and helpful to know what kind of outreach we need to continue doing in future years. So the demographic questions that follow, please note that those are optional and will not be seen by the juror. So all of this information that you're entering about age and ethnicity, those are for internal purposes. The jurors do not review it and they do not take any of this into account. They don't even see it in your application. All of that is removed from their review. So we only ask that you provide this information again so that we know who we are reaching through our outreach efforts.
And the juror doesn't even see your name. So the juror, or your first name maybe, but like they really don't see much, but definitely not this section. So this helps us more than anything, make sure we're reaching everyone we possibly can. And that's it. And then you would hit submit. And we will get notified, and then we'll start our pre-screen. So let me close out of here. I'm gonna grab the links, but I think you could start the Q&A if someone wants to.
Sure. So there was a question in here in the chat. So you can either put them in the chat, or you can just raise your hand, or you can use the raise hand button at this point. So Naomi, you asked to clarify, if you were enrolled in a graduate program, you are not eligible, correct? That is correct. I am enrolled in a master's program through Scotland Conservatory and receiving no federal funding. That is the guidelines that we've set out. So you would not be able to apply if you're in that degree seeking program at this time. These links have gone in if you want to look at them. Nancy, I see your question. Will there be fellowship opportunities for other non-music? Yes, the performing arts rotate on a 3-year cycle. So we go music, the following year dance, the following year theater, and performance art. So that is the cycle that the performing arts are running off of. Other questions?
While we wait for more questions, I do want to talk about the 3 different disciplines, and within those disciplines, there's a more detailed breakdown of who's eligible to apply. So for example, if you're a visual artist, anyone who practices in painting, drawing, printmaking, photography, sculpture, et cetera, all of that is listed in the full guidelines on the website. So I do suggest that you head over there and just take a look. And if you feel like maybe your practice falls outside of any of those, which is a very, very broad description of visual arts, go ahead and contact us. But for both visual arts and design, these categories are extremely broad. So what we want is really anyone who practices in those fields to feel like they can apply. Yeah, I see someone with a question. Oh, it looks like you're muted.
That checks out. Okay.
There you go.
So kind of following that question, if we have like, if we're like multidisciplinary, so I do printmaking, a little bit of painting and illustration, can we submit works from multiple mediums, or are you just looking for kind of like one focus?
I would say, because we are asking you to select one discipline under which your application will be reviewed, you should craft your application to reflect the best of that category that you're selecting. So if you're saying you are a designer, perhaps you want to make sure that the work represents your design work the best that it can. Otherwise, again, as Jason mentioned, our jurors will only review those applications that fall within their disciplines. So that won't give you as much of a leg up, if you will, in that review.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then I see a question from Angela. Do you consider filmmaker applicants? It depends. So narrative and documentary filmmakers are not eligible to apply under any of the categories. However, if you're someone that creates new genre work in video, that can be considered visual arts and is eligible. But if your work is strictly narrative or documentary, you will not be eligible to apply.
So my work is more experimental and it's with dance. So is that something they would look at?
I would say why don't you reach out and maybe show us a sample of the work? What I'm hearing, I feel like it might, Jason, you might want to chime in here because we do have a dance category under performing arts.
And
But
dance,
this is not a performance, that it's a video art.
Oh, yes. Okay. That would then be eligible.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, Rosanna. I think I'm clicking ask to unmute. Yep, you're unmuted.
I just want to make sure I understood clearly. One of my pieces can only be clearly seen with a detail, but I can't use one of my 10 slides as a detail. I have to combine the detail and the full picture together so that there are 10 separate and distinct work samples. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Mhm.
Yes. And that's why I use the example of PDF, because in my head, that's the easiest way to show multiple images and have one file to upload.
The file size that you can upload in Submittable is quite large, so you shouldn't lose too much detail through, having multiple images in one page. Anyone else?
I have another question, please.
Sure.
Do they consider what you do for a living? For example, I am a visiting professor at a university. Is that going to affect that into this?
Not necessarily. I mean, that is information that you can certainly add to your resume, and that is helpful because it'll inform how active you are in the community. And I think that, being an arts professor, that is you being active in the arts community. So that's important to include definitely in your CV. However, and I'm not sure what type of professor you are, but unless the work that you are doing there relates to your own art practice, I would not include anything that falls outside of what you yourself are creating in your studio.
Sorry, I didn't understand the last part you said. So
So
nothing to do with my teaching by my own art work.
right, and I'm not really sure if what you're asking is work that you are creating for your classes, if that would be eligible.
No, it's stuff that I have done outside the classroom, outside the university.
Yes, that would certainly be eligible.
Okay, thank you.
If anyone else has any last questions, please put them in the chat. I'm also going to drop my email in the chat. We do ask everyone to just thoroughly go over the guidelines. We've put a lot of time into those to try to answer all questions. But of course, if you still have any, please feel free to reach out. I will be kind of the contact for the edits on Submittable. So again, if you have like a further question about submitting it correctly, please feel free to reach out so we could avoid that edit process altogether. And there is my email. And then other than that, I don't see any more questions. Nancy, Jason, do you have any final words?
no, but thank you so much for joining us. And again, we have recorded this, and we could probably stop the recording at this point.